Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson today. We are listening to the most twisted cases you've ever
Identified
heard.
as 18-year-old Peter Zito Jr. of Beaverton and 16-year-old Donald Bartron of Aloha. Their bodies were discovered at about 3:45 this morning near the Oak Hills Recreation Center.
He's just a happy kid, and it was terrible that he was gone.
Yeah, it's on October 4th, 1974, when the newspaper delivery driver was on his way to work. He had no idea that he was about to witness the scene that would make the next day's headlines that would read, "Two boys shot dead in a suburb of Portland." When he reached the parking lot of Oak Hills Rec Center, he happened to stumble upon the bodies of two teenage boys with multiple gunshot wounds to the head, covered in their own blood. The investigators searched for the person responsible for the killings, but despite their efforts, the culprit evaded justice for almost 50 years until he was finally caught. So, who were these boys? And why were they targeted? Welcome to M7 Crime Story Time, where we shed light on solved, unsolved, and twisted cases from across the world. Portland, Oregon, with a population of around 905,000 residents, was an area of contrasts in the 1970s, where smut and corruption mingled with dance crazes and social change. In the 19th century, it rapidly evolved from a rough and tumble port town into one of the most dangerous port cities of the West Coast. Its waterfront was as notorious as it was bustling. Portland held on to its working class roots amidst the growing cosmopolitanism of the West Coast. Physically, the city appeared to be falling apart, even in the face of urban decay. As night fell, the city's discotheques came alive with the beats of disco music. Discomania was born, and soon became a billion-dollar industry. Booze-fueled key parties were all the rage, while bitter divorces played out like soap operas. This was the world in which two teenagers, 18-year-old Peter Zito Jr. and 16-year-old Donald Barton, were growing up. Born in 1956 to Peter and Faith Zito, Peter Zito Jr. was a gentle boy. At 18 years old, he loved his pet cats the most. The only thing that came close to his cats was his 1956 Oldsmobile. He had been an Aloha High School student where he was on the football team, but recently he dropped out of school and was working as a dishwasher. Even so, he aspired to get his diploma from Portland Community College. Peter was friends with a 16-year-old boy named Donald Barton, who was born May 2nd, 1958. He was very close to his mother, Irene Barton. He was also a student of Aloha High School and played hockey for his school team. He previously worked night shifts at the recreational center and was also a part-time employee at the bustling Black Angus restaurant. Not much information is publicly available about Donald's personal life. However, these two young boys would soon become household names. Back on October 4th, 1974, just before dawn, an Oregonian newspaper delivery driver began his morning route. Little did he know that something unimaginable was waiting for him. Something that would become the talk of the town and make the front page of the newspaper that he'd carry the next day. As he drove along his route, he eventually arrived at the Oak Hills Recreational Center's parking lot. There, in the dim light of dawn, he noticed a parked car, a 1956 Oldsmobile, that seemed out of place. But then he noticed the two lifeless bodies next to it.
The date is 10/3/74.
Detectives made this film of the crime scene at the Oak Hills Recreation Center. Peter's body was next to his car.
At the driver's side door.
He was shot in the front of the head. His 16-year-old friend, Donald Bartron, was slumped inside the engine compartment where he'd been trying to fix the car. He was shot in the back of the head. The footage was discovered by Detective Robert Rookhausen.
The fact that two teenagers, shot in the head there, just blew everyone away.
When the detectives reached the location, they discovered the lifeless body of a teenage boy, later identified as Peter Zito Jr., lying beside the car's driver's side door.
He's just a happy kid, and it was terrible when I heard that he was gone.
As they peered under the car's open hood, another distressing sight awaited them. Donald Broughton, who appeared to have been working on the car's engine, was discovered slumped over.
The victims have been identified as 18-year-old Peter Zito Jr. of Beaverton and 16-year-old Donald Bartron of Aloha. Their bodies were discovered about 3:45 this morning near the Oak Hills Recreation Center.
Both the teams were shot execution style, and not just once. Multiple bullet wounds were found about their heads. The forensic report suggested they were shot using a .22 caliber gun. It was challenging to draw definitive conclusions about the motive or circumstances surrounding the crime, but it seemed like a targeted attack. The only major theory that stood out at the time was that the young men had gotten into a personal dispute with someone who couldn't let go of the grudge and ultimately killed both Peter and David. Working on this theory, the detectives soon found a crucial clue. Within just 12 hours, they discovered that an 18-year-old Lincoln High School student named Joseph Amir Wilson had been involved in a fight with another man the night before at the recreational center. Some detectives believed that Joseph wanted to get back at the man who'd beaten him, along with that man's brother. Joseph's intentions were nothing short of killing the two men. So, in his rage, he went out to seek revenge, but encountered Peter and Donald instead. Mistaking them for the other two men he was looking for, he ended up killing the two teenage boys. The theory was plausible, and circumstantial evidence checked out. So, without wasting any time, the detectives arrested, charged, and later indicted Joseph Wilson for these crimes. Following his arrest, his hands were checked for trace metal detection analysis and were also subjected to a neutron activation test to determine whether he'd recently fired a weapon. It was about to be the most solid proof to highlight his guilt. But the real shocker was yet to come. Both the tests came back negative. Despite that, the detectives ended up charging him for the murders based on circumstantial evidence. Even though Joseph was charged with the crime, something didn't sit right with the detectives. First of all, there was no solid proof that he'd killed Peter and Donald. Secondly, he constantly denied any involvement in the crime. Some detectives believed him, but others were of the mindset that every criminal says they're not guilty, and found this case no different. Even so, Detective Jim Welsh was sure that Joseph Wilson was not the killer. He was still on the lookout for the real culprit. So when a teenage boy was arrested in December 1974 for theft, Detective Welsh was on high alert. The theft case and the double murder did not seem related, but a connection would eventually emerge. When a sheriff's deputy, Jim Spinden, searched the boy's car, a .22 caliber handgun was found illegally concealed. The boy was 17-year-old Stephen Paul Criss. In a city like Portland, chance encounters were not that unusual, but such connections can be troubling when the matter at hand concerns a double murder. So when Criss turned out to be Donald's colleague at the Black Angus restaurant in Hillsborough, some eyebrows were raised. Detectives discovered that they did not get along well. In fact, Criss was upset with Donald that day. However, it wasn't a solid reason to arrest him for the double murders. The building suspicions seemed to be clouding rational judgment. To settle the matter, a ballistics test was carried out, and the result came out to be negative. The gun was returned to Criss. Even though detectives had let Criss go, they felt that they had some circumstantial evidence against him, so they began looking into Joseph's possible involvement in the case once again. Without any murder weapon or DNA, there was no way to figure out what was the truth. The case had already been full of twists and turns that kept everyone on the edge of their seat. So ultimately, Joseph was subjected to 2 lie detector tests. The stakes were high, so the results were examined by 5 independent polygraph operators. After thoroughly going through the tests, the conclusion was filed. But it wasn't what the detectives had been hoping for. All the reports said that he'd cleared the test. Finally, they seemed to realize that they had to move on when there were no substantial leads or clues that could prove him guilty in a court of law. So in early 1975, the detectives released Joseph from the prison after he spent 4 months there. But he was not off the suspect list just yet. After his release, he went back to Aloha High School to finish his senior year. Now, the question remained, who killed Donald and Peter? For years, there'd been no answers to this question. The case slowly grew cold. On the first anniversary of the crime, in October 1975, the families of Peter and Donald came forward to show appreciation for the investigators' efforts. Donald's mother, Irene Barton, said, "We don't feel bitter about the fact that no one's been caught." She, however, did highlight the fact that it felt unfair that they didn't know who'd done this to her boy. But being bitter hurt even more, especially when they seemed so far away from finding out what happened to her son, Donald. Faith Zito, Peter's mother, also believed that the investigators were doing a fine job and justice would be done. She also said, "I don't know what form it will take, but God will be the judge." Unfortunately, after a year, the case was at a standstill. The only update in the case was related to a former suspect, Chris. In 1976, he went to the Fort Lewis United States Air Base in Washington. He had a job there taking care of animals as a vet. On October 8, 1976, almost 2 years after he was suspected of a double murder, he got into a fight with his boss, Sergeant Jacob Kim Brown. Sergeant Brown told Chris he needed to pay for fixing his car because Chris had damaged it. But either he didn't have the money or just didn't want to pay for the repairs. So instead, Chris decided to kill the man. In a fit of rage, he shot Sergeant Brown in the head 5 times with the same gun that was checked in Peter and Donald's case. He was arrested and charged without any ballistic testing because Chris had already confessed to the crime. The judge subsequently sentenced him to 35 years in jail, but in 1988, after just 12 years, Chris was released on parole. 48 years later, in 2022, the sheriffs in Washington County, one of whom was Detective Mark Pavolny, decided to take another look at the double murder case. Looking at the file of Jim Welsh, the detective who suspected Chris from the start, the cold case detectives found vital evidence. They wanted to retest the gun that Chris used to kill Brown. This time, in February 2022, the test showed that it was, in fact, the same gun used in the case of the 2 boys, Peter and Donald. In the 70s, ballistics testing generally meant that an expert was going to use a microscope to compare test fire from the suspected gun to a slug retrieved from the crime scene. It could easily account for human error and could not have been foolproof. The gun match became the oldest known match nationwide that the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives had ever been able to confirm. As a result, Stephen Paul Chris, who had been living in Iowa all these years, was taken into custody using the same pair of handcuffs used when deputies arrested him in December 1974.
While reviewing the case file, we decided to take a second look at the ballistic testing, since it had been done nearly 50 years ago. Detective Shannon Wild is my partner on this case, and she has helped extensively, particularly with the ballistics. She submitted ballistic evidence to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, more commonly known as the ATF. That same day, an ATF supervisor notified Detective Wild there was a presumptive match, showing the gun Steve Chris used to murder Sergeant Brown was in fact the same gun he used to murder Donnie Bartron and Pete Zito Jr. The next step was to confirm that presumptive match, which was done at the Oregon State Police Crime Lab. Lab technicians also confirmed the gun Steve possessed in December 1974 when he was stopped by Deputy Stindon, and then used in the October 1976 murder, was also used to murder Don and Pete.
Detective Welsh, who had passed away more than a decade ago, helped catch the real culprit through his well-documented case files. After his arrest, the now 65-year-old Chris was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder. The motive was not yet revealed to the public, and the investigation is still ongoing. They're looking into the possibility that Chris was responsible for more homicides. Therefore, they're seeking information from the public about Chris's life after he was released from prison. Sheriff Pat Garrett extended formal apologies to Joseph Wilson's relatives for the wrongful arrest nearly 50 years earlier. Joseph had, by then, become a self-employed landscaper and a member of the First United Methodist Church. In 2000, he died of a heart attack at the age of 43. The sheriff's office asked for help from the local residents to identify or locate any surviving family members of Joseph to make a personal and direct apology. Peter Zito's sister, Barbara Zito, said,
It's a difficult thing to deal with, to have to accept that, your brother can be murdered this way and there's nobody accountable for it.
Donald's and Peter's families suffered for almost 50 years without knowing what happened to their boys or who murdered them. Even though Chris is now behind bars, it provides little comfort to the parents who were robbed of all those years with their sons. Why do you think Joseph was arrested, despite some evidence suggesting his innocence? But Chris was let go, even though he had a possible murder weapon. Do you think the investigators weren't careful enough when they initially inspected his gun? Although nothing can bring Donald and Peter back, the family can now trace their relief in the fact that the killer of their sons is no longer living a free life and can't hurt anyone else. Justice was finally served. When 35-year-old Dave Krupa found himself single after a decade-long relationship, he decided to give online dating a try. Dave was looking to have some fun, nothing serious. He'd made several new female companions, but none captivated him like Carrie Farver did. Intelligent, beautiful, and charming, 37-year-old Carrie was also just looking to have fun. But when their short-lived romance came to an abrupt end, Dave wasn't prepared for the craziness that would follow. For the next 3 years, Dave would come to understand the proverb, "Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned." But what had made the charming Carrie flip? And what shocking secrets lay behind the harassment that Dave faced? With a population of 486,000, Omaha is the largest city in the state of Nebraska and the seat of Douglas County. Situated along the Missouri River, Omaha's rural setting and gorgeous landscapes give it a wholesome feel. But don't be fooled by the city's laid-back nature, because it's also home to one of the top zoos in the world. The Henry Dorley Zoo and Aquarium is known for its unique exhibits and innovative conservation methods. A city this big can't be free of crime, and Omaha's crime rate is often ranked above the national average. Despite this, Omaha is considered a charming and affordable place to live and raise a family. This is where, in 2012, Dave Krupa became tangled in a web of lies and fear when he decided to start dating again. Born in 1976 in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, Dave Krupa was considered the quintessential nice guy. He was the eldest of 3 boys and was raised in a Southern Baptist family. Growing up, Dave played American football, but his dreams were dashed following an injury in his freshman year in high school. He eventually dropped out of sports altogether. After graduating from school, he joined the United States National Guard, where he served for 2 years before receiving a discharge from the service. Dave then enrolled in college and studied toward an associate degree in automotive engineering. He then began working in Council Bluffs, Iowa. In the year 2000, Dave met Amy Flora in Iowa. The two moved in together and started a family of their own. Their daughter, Castillo, was born in 2001, followed by a son, Trey, in 2003. But over the years, Dave and Amy's relationship became strained. Money, lack of quality, and failure to commit were their biggest hurdles. So, after 12 years together, in 2012, the couple decided to separate while still co-parenting their children. Needing a change of pace, 35-year-old Dave moved to Omaha, Nebraska for his new job as manager at an automotive repair shop. He also started using online dating sites to meet women. Dave was upfront with his dates. He wasn't looking for anything serious. One of these women he met was Shanna Elizabeth Goliar, or Liz, and she was a 37-year-old mother of 2. Dave and Liz had intense chemistry and found many things in common with each other. But after 6 months of on and off dating, Dave felt claustrophobic in the relationship. He asked Liz for some space. And just as that relationship was ending, Dave would meet a woman who he believed ticked all the right boxes, 37-year-old Carrie Farver. In mid-October 2012, Dave was at work and he crossed paths with Carrie Farver. She needed some repair work done on her black 2008 Ford Explorer. Dave was the one to help her.
6 months after I met Liz, I'm at the counter managing the shop, and I'm the person greeting customers when they come in, and an extremely attractive woman walks in the door.
Nothing came of the encounter, but he was immediately taken by her. 2 weeks later, he came across Carrie's profile on the dating app Plenty of Fish.
When we looked at each other, there was a little spark. We both smiled. You feel that sometimes.
After a flurry of flirtatious text exchanges, the two agreed to meet for dinner at an Applebee's in Omaha on November 3rd, 2012. After dinner, they returned to Dave's apartment. Carrie and Dave both agreed they just wanted to have some fun with each other.
So Carrie and I ended up going to Applebee's for our first date. We hit it off. As we're getting up to leave, I asked Carrie if she wanted to come over and hang out. And she said, yeah.
However, their night was disrupted by Liz, who was demanding to be led into the apartment to collect her belongings. Carrie told Dave to come over to her house after he sorted things out with Liz. Both women shared a brief glance at each other as they passed in the hallway. At around 9:30 p.m. that night, Dave made his way to Carrie's house. After that night, the two began a casual and exclusive relationship. Carrie Lee Farver was born on November 30th, 1974, to Nancy and Danny Farver. She had an older brother named Adam. When Carrie was just 18 months old, her parents divorced. However, they remained on good terms with each other even after the separation. In 1981, Carrie's mother Nancy married her high school sweetheart. Mark was a great stepfather to Carrie and Adam, and the entire family relocated to Macedonia in Iowa. Early in her life, it was clear that Carrie had an adventurous and independent spirit. She was also very intelligent and excelled in academics.
You noticed Carrie when she walked into her room. She had a laugh, she had a smile. You were drawn to her.
As she grew older, Carrie developed a slight rebellious streak, like most teenagers do. Carrie and Nancy had their fair share of arguments over the years, but they still remained close. After graduating high school, Carrie went off to study at a Kansas college, where she met and fell in love with a man named Frank. Carrie soon discovered she was pregnant, and while she and Frank tried hard to make it work, they eventually went their separate ways. Concerned about being a cash-strapped single mother, Carrie enrolled for a 6-month computer course, which her grandparents helped pay for. A few weeks after completing the course, she gave birth to her son, Maxwell. Soon after that, Carrie was offered a programming job that paid well enough to support her son and herself. Over the next few years, Carrie married twice and divorced twice. She briefly moved to Topeka, Kansas, but missed her family. She suffered long periods of depression and mental illness. Carrie was eventually diagnosed with bipolar disorder and started medication to deal with the illness.
I think she was a little overwhelmed just being on her own in her late 20s. She started developing depression.
In 2012, Carrie moved back to Macedonia, Iowa to be closer to her family and raise her 14-year-old son. She also decided against starting a serious relationship, opting to focus on herself and her son Maxwell. However, after meeting Dave, something seemed to have shifted in Carrie. Over the next 2 weeks, Dave and Carrie started dating exclusively, but remained casual. They met frequently for dinner and spent several nights together at each other's homes. During this time, Carrie was given a major project to oversee at her workplace in Omaha. The extra hours at work and the long commute from her home in Macedonia would leave Carrie without any spare time to spend with Dave. It was then that Dave had a brilliant idea. His apartment in Omaha was just a 20-minute drive from Carrie's workplace. The two of them had grown extremely comfortable with each other, which prompted Dave to ask Carrie to stay at his apartment until her project at work was complete. Carrie was grateful for the offer. She arranged for her son, Maxwell, to stay with her parents in Macedonia while she moved in temporarily with Dave. On the evening of November 12, 2012, Carrie drove to Dave's apartment and set herself up at his place. The two of them spent the evening together before getting ready for bed. On the morning of November 13, 2012, Carrie woke up early to start work. She was sitting on the couch in the living room, still in her pajamas and typing away at her laptop, as Dave showered and made a pot of coffee. At around 6:20 a.m., Dave left for work. He kissed Carrie goodbye and promised to see her that evening. Unbeknownst to Dave, his life was about to change unexpectedly in the next few hours. Shortly after 10 a.m., Dave received an odd text from Carrie. Carrie was suggesting that the two of them move in together permanently. Dave was confused at her sudden change of heart when they had already mutually decided to keep their relationship casual. Not wanting to hurt Carrie's feelings, Dave politely declined the offer and reminded her of their agreement.
She texts me and says, let's move in together, which was very left field because we had already talked about that not happening. As soon as I can, I text her back and say, I'm not interested. I can't do that. We haven't known each other nearly long enough for that.
Within seconds, Carrie responded with a cutting text, telling Dave that she never wanted to see him again and that he'd ruined her life. Dave was surprised by her angry outburst, as just that morning they were smiling and making plans for the evening. It seemed Carrie had spiraled out of control in a matter of hours. Dave decided not to think too much about it, believing he may have dodged a bullet with Carrie after all. Meanwhile, Carrie's colleagues and supervisor were growing concerned as she didn't report to work that day. Carrie had called her supervisor earlier that morning and agreed to go into the office to verify the work she'd done. But by mid-morning, Carrie still hadn't showed up. It was unusual for Carrie to just disappear, as she was responsible and reliable. Her supervisor tried to call Carrie throughout the day, but it only went to voicemail. She left several messages, but there was no response. That evening, when Dave returned to his apartment, there was no sign of Carrie or her car. He was still recovering from the abrupt end to their short-lived relationship. He felt disappointed by Carrie's behavior. She had seemed so positive and independent that he believed they could have worked well together. But it seemed he didn't know who she really was after all. For Dave, it seemed as if Carrie had blown in and out of his life like a wild storm. For 2 days, he heard nothing from her. But this was only the calm before the storm. Then his phone began beeping with several disturbing texts from Carrie. In the texts, she accused him of being a horrible person and blamed him repeatedly for ruining her life. Dave received hundreds of harassing text messages and emails from Carrie. She threatened him and even mentioned his ex-girlfriend, Liz Golier.
I would regularly receive 60 plus texts a day, 100 emails a day. It was not uncommon.
Dave found the situation bizarre. Why was Carrie berating Liz when they didn't even know each other? At the same time, in Macedonia, Iowa, Carrie's mother Nancy and son Maxwell also received several text messages from her. Carrie told them she was quitting her job in Omaha and taking up a new offer in Kansas. Many of Carrie's friends also received similar texts.
I started getting text messages that said that she was taking a job in Kansas, which totally threw me.
Maxwell told Nancy that Carrie once mentioned a potential job in Kansas and might have opted to make the move. Still unsure, Nancy decided to give Carrie the benefit of the doubt, hoping that with time and space, her daughter would return home. Back in Omaha, the situation with the relentless text attacks on Dave was about to escalate. On November 23, 2012, Dave's ex-girlfriend, Liz Golier, was driving back home when she noticed a vulgar message spray-painted on her garage wall. She immediately contacted Dave and told him that she too had been receiving threatening texts from Carrie. Liz then called the Omaha Police Department to file a report of harassment against Carrie Farver. These threats against Dave and Liz eventually led them to getting back together, as they now shared a common enemy. But they still didn't understand what had pushed Carrie over the edge. When Carrie failed to show up for her half-brother John's wedding on November 16, 2012, Nancy decided to report her missing to the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office. Nancy told officers about the text messages and revealed that Carrie suffered from bipolar disorder. Allegedly, police didn't take Nancy's pleas seriously. As time passed, Carrie missed several important events that included Thanksgiving, Maxwell's 15th birthday, and her father Danny's funeral. By then, Nancy knew something was terribly wrong. Carrie loved her family immensely and wouldn't have missed these important events at any cost. Meanwhile, in Omaha, Carrie's stalking had reached another level. Dave was receiving messages from Carrie about exactly what he was wearing or doing at any given time. Whenever Dave and Liz were together, their phones would blow up with several text messages from Carrie threatening violence against the pair. After months of harassment, there was finally a small breakthrough. In January 2013, Dave was returning from work late at night when he spotted a familiar vehicle in the parking lot of his complex. He took a picture of the number plate and sent it to the Omaha Police Department. The police confirmed it was Carrie's Ford Explorer. The vehicle was impounded and checked, but no physical evidence linked to Carrie was found in the car. The only item was a fresh mint container that had a fingerprint. The print was sent to the Federal Bureau of Investigation and run through the National Fingerprint Database, but there was no match. Based on this new development in Omaha, investigators back in Iowa started to take Nancy's concerns seriously. 5 months after Carrie disappeared, Nancy got her first ray of hope. She received a call from a man at the Sienna Francis House Emergency Shelter in Omaha who told her that Carrie was there with him.
I get a call from a gentleman that says that Carrie is at the Sienna Francis homeless shelter and that she wants you to come pick her up. My heart just started. I was just so shaking. She's gonna be okay.
Yes. Investigators raided the shelter.
Opera.
However, it was a hoax and caused Nancy even more.
Opera.
15-year-old Maxwell tried to reach out to his mother on Facebook. Miraculously, Carrie replied, asking him how he was doing. But when Maxwell asked her to answer 3 personal questions about him to prove that it was really her, she got angry and stopped responding. Nancy started receiving nasty text messages from Carrie, accusing Nancy of being a horrible mother. These texts were crude and often contained misspelled words. This made Nancy increasingly skeptical. She knew her daughter was always careful about using correct spellings and phrases in her messages. In Omaha, things were starting to heat up. The terror Carrie had brought upon Dave and Liz took a toll on their relationship, and they eventually split up. But this didn't stop Carrie from continuing to harass the pair. In one message to Dave, she said she was going to kill Liz and sent him a picture of a woman tied up in the trunk of a car. Dave then called Liz, who confirmed she was all right. But things didn't stop there.
I get an email, and it's a picture of what looks like Liz tied up in the trunk of a car, and it says, I have Liz tied up in the trunk of the car, and you need to call her right now and tell her you hate her. She's a whore, otherwise I'm going to kill her.
On August 16, 2013, Liz's house was set on fire. Fortunately, she and her children were living elsewhere at the time, but their 2 pet dogs, a cat and a snake, were killed in the inferno.
I get a call from Liz, frantic, freaking out. My house is on fire. Somebody's burned my house down. So I go over to Liz's house, and there's fire trucks all up and down the street, and there's firemen walking around, and there's hoses, and they're pouring water into place.
And Liz told an officer she knew who did it.
The guy that I've seen, he has a girlfriend who did it for 2 weeks, and she's been stalking her since November.
Do you know her name?
It's Karen. C-A-R-I.
David started to grow paranoid. He bought himself a 9mm Smith & Wesson pistol for protection, but Carrie kept coming after Dave. Soon after the fire at Liz's house, an auto shop where Dave worked was vandalized, and in the following months, Carrie's threats grew more and more dangerous. In January 2014, Dave invited an old high school friend named Heather Twett to his apartment to spend the night. But the couple were terrorized all night long by Carrie, who sent Dave several nasty messages. At one point, they heard the handle on the front door being jiggled violently before a large brick was thrown through the bathroom window. Even more concerning, Carrie was starting to threaten Dave's ex-girlfriend, Amy Flora, and their kids too. Nearly 2 years after she breezed through his life and vanished, Carrie kept crazily pushing the boundaries. She seemed determined to go after anyone Dave had been in contact with. By spring of 2015, more than 2 years had passed, and investigators were nowhere close to finding Carrie Farver. The case had become popular among the officers at the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office in Iowa. It caught the attention of detectives Ryan Avis and Jim Doty, who volunteered to take over the case.
We heard about the case. It was kind of water cooler talk around the office. It intrigued us. It was a single mom who was very into her kid and family, and it just didn't make sense to us that she just vanished.
The detectives planned to investigate the case from 2 angles, one where Carrie was missing, and the other where Carrie was possibly dead. Avis and Doty started with the original case files. Doty found it strange that Carrie had not accessed any of her checking accounts since her disappearance. It was impossible that she was living without any money all these years. Another intriguing discovery was that Carrie only communicated through text, email, and social media messages, never phone calls. From what they'd read about Carrie, she seemed like a person who was devoted to her family, so these behaviors were rather odd. Avis and Doty picked up another strange recurring detail in the original case files. Liz Golier featured prominently in the documents as a victim of harassment, but they couldn't understand why Carrie would target a woman she barely knew. Both Dave and Liz had allowed investigators to download the contents of their phones back in 2013 during the initial investigation regarding the harassment. Avis and Doty teamed up with Anthony Cava, a tech specialist within the police department, to go through the downloads from 2013. It was then that Cava stumbled upon evidence that put Liz in the spotlight of the investigation. Deleted files were recovered from Liz's phone contents. Among these files were images of Carrie's car from before Carrie was first reported missing by her family. Investigators also found between 20 and 30 fake email accounts linked to Liz's phone. Added to that, Cava found an app that allowed the phone user to schedule times for when messages would be sent to another person. The digital evidence was shocking, but it still wasn't enough to charge Liz with anything. Detectives needed to find Carrie's car, which had been sold a few years earlier. After tracking down and procuring the vehicle, the team decided to treat it like a crime scene. Accordingly, forensic analysts examined every inch of the vehicle. When they stripped away the car seat covers, they found blood soaked into the cushions of the front passenger seat. The blood was determined to be human, and after further testing, was found to match Carrie's DNA. The fingerprint that had been recovered from the original investigation 2 years ago was tested against the fingerprints of Liz Gollier. It proved to be a positive match, another important addition to the physical evidence linked to Carrie's disappearance.
Looking at Liz's phone download, we had the picture of Carrie's vehicle. We had the *67 phone calls that Liz had placed to Carrie's home phone number.
And there's one more piece of evidence, that mystery fingerprint left in Carrie's car. But so far, police can't find a match in their database.
One of the things we did when we took the case is we had that fingerprint compared to Liz's fingerprints. It was a match.
Avis and Doty found yet another clue that pointed towards Liz knowing much more than she was telling them. Nancy showed police an image of a bank check from the person who had bought all of Carrie's furniture after she allegedly relocated to Kansas. The check was signed by Shanna Liz Gollier. Investigators questioned people that knew Liz and discovered troubling secrets from her past. Liz had once harassed her ex-boyfriend and his new wife, and had stalked the couple until they eventually divorced. Clearly, this was not the first time Liz had grown obsessed over a man. As investigators started to put together the puzzle of Carrie Farver's disappearance, Liz came forward with another shocking revelation. She told investigators that she believed Dave's ex-girlfriend, Amy Flora, had killed Liz, stolen her identity, and had been the one harassing them these past 3 years.
Amy Flora is Dave Krupa's ex-girlfriend and also the mother of his children. Now, all these years, Liz thought she had been harassed by Carrie, but now she thought maybe it was actually Amy this whole time pretending to be Carrie, and that would make more sense, right?
They only dated for 2 weeks, and I don't understand why a person would still be stalking him almost 3 years later. It's getting ridiculous. She keeps stalking me on Facebook.
So Amy still would like to be with Dave?
I'm asking her.
By then, investigators knew that Liz was clutching at straws to save herself. They needed a plan for Liz to implicate herself. In a surprising twist, the Iowa Police Department received a 911 call from Liz at 6:30 p.m. on December 5, 2015. Liz reported that she'd been shot in the leg by a woman while walking alone at Big Lake Park. Investigators from the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office responded to the scene and saw Liz with a gunshot wound in her left thigh.
The address of your emergency. I've been shot away. Oh, my can't wait to show some blood. Oh, Jesus.
Is Taylor still nearby?
I don't think so. No,
Liz insisted that Amy Flora, Dave's ex-girlfriend, had shot her. But while Liz recovered from her injuries, investigators were able to clear Amy from the investigation entirely. Firstly, officers examined Amy's car and found that the engine was cold, meaning she hadn't used it that evening. Secondly, Amy's neighbor told officers that they'd seen her with her children around the apartment complex during the time of Liz's shooting. The police were also notified that Dave had reported his gun stolen. Investigators determined that Liz had stolen Dave's gun and shot herself to mislead the investigation. Almost immediately, in the days that followed, Liz started fabricating emails from Amy that stated she was the one who shot Liz at Big Lake Park. Another email described in detail how Amy had stabbed Carrie 3 to 4 times before stuffing her body in a garbage bag. Investigators were aware that Liz was the person fabricating the emails from Amy. They were just manipulating Liz into providing the physical evidence they needed. But the most vital evidence came from a memory card that belonged to Liz and was found in Dave's tablet.
There were selfies that Liz had taken. I mean, there was everything that you would normally have on your cell phone. But then I came to a photo that no one had seen before. It was reddish, and I wasn't sure what I was looking at first, but it turned out to be a human foot. Human foot with a tattoo.
Among the deleted files that the team could recover was one distressing image. This was a photo of a human foot that showed signs of decomposition. On the foot was a tattoo, later confirmed to match a tattoo that Carrie had gotten years earlier. Liz was brought in for questioning and presented with the evidence. These included the photos from her phone, the IP address traced back to her house, and the fabricated confession emails from Amy. Liz denied any knowledge of these. However, a search of Liz's house provided more physical evidence, including a digital camera and camcorder belonging to Carrie. On the camcorder was a video recorded by Carrie just 2 days before she disappeared. On December 22, 2016, Shanna Liz Gollier was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. Her defense attorney, James Martin Davis, requested that she be given a bench trial in which the judge would be allowed to make the final decision. Davis argued that the entire case was based on circumstantial evidence, and there was no proof of a body to charge Liz with murder.
You're gonna not hear a single eyewitness saying, yeah, we saw her kill her. We saw her stab her. Well, not a single eyewitness even saw my client with the victim in this case.
However, Douglas County District Attorney Brenda Beadle argued that Liz was a diabolical woman who had not only killed Carrie Farver, but continued to harass everyone that knew her.
This is a bizarre and twisted case of a failed attraction. It's about an obsessive woman that would stop at nothing to get what she wanted.
At the trial, the prosecution presented uncontested evidence that proved that Liz saw Carrie as a romantic rival for Dave's affections. They also showed that she'd become unhinged by Dave's rejection and had impersonated Carrie for years in order to grow closer to him through shared traumatic experiences. Liz's obsession was so dangerous that she'd set her own house on fire and killed her pets, and also shot herself in the leg while blaming Carrie and Amy. In 2017, Judge Timothy Burns found Liz guilty of first-degree murder and arson. He sentenced her to life in prison at the Nebraska Correctional Center for Women. This case was undoubtedly one of the most perplexing cases ever investigated by the Omaha Police Department. For Dave Krupa, it remains a waking nightmare. He's spoken out about being naive to the fact that Liz was such a sinister individual. To this day, Carrie's body has not been found. Dave said on numerous occasions that Carrie's mother, Nancy, and son Maxwell are the real victims of this crime. Nancy and Maxwell have continued to march forward with their lives, even though Carrie's death has left a major void that can't be filled. Maxwell has continued in his mother's footsteps, pursuing a degree in software engineering and data sciences at Iowa State University. On November 3, 2006, Wake County police officers responded to a 911 call made by Meredith Fisher just after 1:30 p.m.
I need the ambulance. It's an emergency.
What address are you at, ma'am?
Birchley, 6108 Birchley Road. Oh my God.
Tell me exactly what happened.
I think my sister's dead.
Tell me what happened, ma'am.
I have no idea. Oh my God.
What's your name?
Meredith Fisher.
Meredith.
Oh my God.
Meredith, listen to me, please.
Yeah.
Are you with the patient, ma'am?
Yeah, but then her daughter.
And how old is the patient?
And there's blood everywhere. She's 28, 29.
You said there's blood everywhere?
Yeah.
All right, is she conscious?
No, I don't think so. Should I try to help her?
Listen to me, ma'am. Is she breathing?
I don't think so.
Have you checked?
You sure? She's cool.
Okay.
There's like blood footprints all over the house.
Hey, listen to me. So do you say she's cold? Can I?
Yeah.
Let's stay on the phone.
I have a God. Sure.
She didn't get on the back.
There's blood in the bed.
I'm gonna get the sheriff's department to pick up on the wrong listen. Let me just talk to you about what you're seeing, okay?
By the time police and paramedics arrived at the house in Raleigh, it was too late to save the 5-month pregnant victim, 29-year-old Michelle Young. The mystery behind Michelle's murder would puzzle investigators for another 3 years, until intense scrutiny of the clues at the crime scene would finally bring her killer to justice. Why was Michelle murdered? And what clues led to the conviction of her killer? The city of Raleigh, North Carolina, is named after Sir Walter Raleigh, the English explorer who established the now lost Roanoke colony, which was the first English settlement in North America. Raleigh is the state capital as well as the seat of Wake County in North Carolina. Nicknamed the City of Oaks for the sheer number of majestic oak trees that line its streets, Raleigh's 476,000 residents enjoy blending the beauty of nature with suburban living. Although prone to tornadoes, Raleigh is rated as one of the safest places in the country when it comes to crime. It's also well known for its elite academic institutions, which form part of the famed Research Triangle. And it was this chance to study in a top-tier university that inspired the ambitious Michelle Young to move to Raleigh and make a life for herself. Michelle Marie Fisher Young was born on February 17, 1977, to Linda and Alan Fisher. She was raised in Sayville, New York, along with her younger sister Meredith. Growing up, Michelle was known for being cheerful and charming. She attended Sayville High School in New York and was the co-captain of the cheerleading squad. Apart from being a talented athlete, Michelle was also a hardworking student. She aspired to become a tax lawyer. After graduating in 1995, she applied to study finance at North Carolina State University. In 1996, she made the move from Sayville, New York to Raleigh, North Carolina. During her freshman year at the university, she joined the cheerleading squad, but quit the team to focus on her studies. Michelle went on to pursue her master's degree and landed a job at an accounting firm in Raleigh. At 23 years old, Michelle was already successful and independent. She was the kind of person who had her priorities in order. The only thing missing from her life was the right partner, and this too would soon change. In February 2001, Michelle was out celebrating her upcoming 24th birthday when she met 26-year-old Jason Young. Like a scene from a romantic movie, Jason accidentally knocked over Michelle's drink when he turned around to get something at the bar. After buying her another drink, Michelle and Jason started to talk. They soon discovered they had a lot in common. Both Michelle and Jason were graduates of North Carolina State University and avid fans of the NC State Wolfpack football team. Jason was a North Carolina native who lived with his mother and stepfather in the city of Brevard and worked as a salesman for Black & Decker. Friends would say that Jason always had an eye for beautiful women, but that changed when he met Michelle. Their relationship started to blossom quickly, and after a few short months, the couple moved in together in Raleigh. They'd been living together for 2 years when, in July 2003, Michelle found out she was expecting their first child. Their relationship was still new, but with a baby on the way, both Michelle and Jason knew it was time to take a more serious step forward. On August 12, 2003, Jason and Michelle wed in a courthouse ceremony in Raleigh. 2 months later, on October 10, 2003, they married in a traditional ceremony surrounded by family. On March 29, 2004, Michelle gave birth to a baby girl whom they named Cassidy. Determined to give their daughter a well-balanced upbringing, Michelle and Jason moved from the city to an upper-middle-class neighborhood on the outskirts of Raleigh. Around the same time, Michelle's younger sister Meredith also moved to Raleigh, and both the sisters were overjoyed that they could spend more time together. As they settled into their family life, their careers also progressed. Michelle was hired by Progress Energy as a senior financial specialist in the tax department. Jason started a new job as a traveling sales representative at Chart One, a medical software company. The couple started making plans to expand their family of 3. In the spring of 2006, Michelle discovered she was pregnant for a second time. To celebrate the news, the couple made a trip to visit Jason's parents in Brevard. But soon, the celebration would turn to tragedy. On the morning that the couple were due to return home, Michelle and Jason took a drive to get coffee. While returning from their short trip, Jason lost control of the vehicle and drove off a 100-foot drop into a deep part of the French Broad River. Fortunately, both Michelle and Jason survived the crash, but Michelle suffered a miscarriage. The couple were able to overcome their loss, and a few months later, Michelle announced that they were expecting again. However, their dream of having a bigger family was soon going to become a waking nightmare. On the evening of November 2, 2006, Jason was preparing to leave for a business meeting scheduled for the next morning in Clintwood, Virginia. Jason wasn't keen on driving such a long distance before a stressful meeting. He decided to book a hotel in Hillsville, Virginia, a halfway point between Clintwood and Raleigh. That same evening, Michelle's close friend Shelley Shad paid her a visit. The two women planned to have a girls' night, since Michelle would be home alone with Cassidy. Jason left home just before dinner. Michelle and Shelley shared a meal with each other after putting Cassidy to bed. They relaxed in the living room and watched Grey's Anatomy. At around 10:30 p.m., Shelley left for the night. Michelle locked up and made her way to bed. She changed into a more comfortable outfit and laid down next to Cassidy before falling asleep. Little did anyone know, Michelle would never wake up from her sleep again. On the morning of Friday, November 3rd, 2006, Michelle's sister, Meredith Fisher, was going about her usual routine when she received a call from Jason, asking for a favor. Jason explained that he wanted to buy Michelle a late anniversary gift. He asked Meredith if she could help him by going over to their house and picking up some eBay printouts of gift ideas he'd left in his home office.